took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom, I'll keep my guns, try to keep my money and my religion too. Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. I'm going to keep my big BA, keep my friends the same, keep the government out of my business, and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
You know what we need? We know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And I got to tell you, I go through these little alternating periods of being positive, and the negativity kind of wears on you. You get put down a lot, especially when you're someone like me, because I want to hear both sides of everything. I want to hear all sides, and so I've always done that. As an investigative reporter, I've gone into the biker bars, and I've gone into the penthouses in Miami Beach and in the yachts in Biscayne Bay. I've traveled to 49 states and 9 countries and got to meet a lot of people. And I have been recording the evolution of the New World Order since I heard George Bush introduce us to it, since I saw what happened at Waco. And I've been doing this radio show for almost 20 years now. Bruce Riggs is my guest today. And Bruce Riggs has a website called DirtyUncleSam.com. Hello, Bruce. How are you?
Great, sir. Yourself?
I'm doing well. I did all of that little introduction there to myself here to set the stage for you, because you say on your website that the government was never given the jurisdiction to do the things they are doing today, that many laws, taxes, restrictions, and government powers in this post-constructional 89 years later jurisdiction. And you say that you will demonstrate with facts and freely available information how this unconstitutional jurisdiction came to be and to fix. And why this is important, Bruce, is that you are running for Congress, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Florida, 5th Congressional District.
And I have always referred to the Republicans and Democrats as two wings of the same bird, and the bird is a global vulture. Would you say that was a accurate description, or is that radical? Is that extremist? Is that anti-government?
No, sir, not at all. Not at all. Not when you look at the fact that the Republican Party was created in 1854, the Democrat Party already existed, and since then both parties have controlled everything. And this problem, our conversion of our citizenship, our standing in law, from constitutional to corporate in the transition period of 1861 to 1871. By 1871, everything was completely converted to corporate. And it's done, so you can't blame a third party for this. Technically, the Republicans represent the right to the 14th Amendment corporate body politic, and the Democrats to the left. And you've got your independents in the middle somewhere, but they're still representing an incorrect standing in law. And that's the problem. That's the reason we think the Constitution's eroding. It's not eroding, it's just becoming more self-evident. We're not under that standing of law.
This is So, you know, Benjamin Franklin, when he was exiting, this is one of his, what he's noted for. He was exiting the Constitution Hall, and he was asked by a woman, "What form of government have you wrought first, Mr. Franklin?" He said, "A constitutional republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." I maintained that we may have lost it in 1913 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve. They established communism in Russia because that could work, and they established the communism here in the form of the Federal Reserve being the fifth plank on the Communist Manifesto.
Well, I don't know. 1913 could be a starting date, but I think we lost our Constitution in 1871, and that's how they got to the point of taking over our just levels of things. In 1933, they got to go to the gold.
Yeah, turn all your gold in for $16, and then once the bankers have it, we'll raise it to $32.
Yeah, that was Executive Order 6102. Gold confiscation. Roosevelt. Anyway, they know they did this. I mean, if you ever seen the 1957 Georgia Mall to Congress, or it makes clear the 14th Amendment was never properly ratified. I found a congressional record from 1909, July 12th, page 4404. They're talking about this new citizenship called the 14th Amendment, which created a different standing in law. I'm sure you're familiar with Article 4, Section 2, which created the original citizenship group we were under, the citizen of the state, aren't you, sir?
Yes, sir.
And then in 1862, Congress redefined the meaning of the word person. And I have all these documents on my website, 30 Uncle Sam. You can click under documents at the top of the screen, and you see the first or second one, you'll find where they redefine the meaning of the word person to include the definition corporation. So in 1868, when a different citizenship was created than which you'll find in Article 4, Section 2 in the original Constitution, the 14th Amendment, the first sentence of it makes clear. It makes all persons citizens of the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And we've already known they redefined the meaning of the word person to include the definition corporation. And then by making all persons citizens of the United States, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, subject to is a very powerful word, and we all know jurisdiction means authority. If the sheriff has got the jurisdiction to take you to jail, that man selling has got the authority to do that. Subject to means you're liable to, subservient to, inferior to, obedient to, affected by, governed by. That's a pretty powerful word when you put jurisdiction after that. Then in 1871, Washington, D.C. did a second Organic Act. The first one is 1801, establishing Washington, D.C. under the jurisdiction of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the United States Constitution, which gives Congress the authority to create a district not more than 10 miles where they have jurisdiction over that. Didn't say anything about the Constitution applying in that little district. And the trick is, by incorporating that district to do business as the United States, February 21st, 1871, and making us citizens of the United States 3 years prior. And when they incorporated it, you listen to some of the wording. This is where people say there's a second constitution.
Okay, what's the date on this again, Bruce?
This document's available on my website. It's February 21st, 1871. Under you're doing business as the United States, I think I have it up there as. Anyway, when they, that's a good place to start. Created to a government by the name of the District of Columbia, which is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes, and may contract and be contracted with, sued and be sued, plea and be pleaded, and have the seal and exercise all the powers of a municipal corporation not inconsistent with the Constitution. Now, just think of the words. This corporation has all the powers not inconsistent with the Constitution, which means it has all the powers consistent with the Constitution.
Yeah, I've made the statement many times that they've really refined the art of slavery so that the slaves don't know they're slaves. The Civil War wasn't fought over slavery. It was fought to it was set up and instigated to divide and conquer, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. In fact, the word free is the opposite of the word subject to. The word subject to is a word of slavery. So remember, the 14th Amendment makes you subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, the word free. Not subject to the legal constraint of another, unconstrained, having the power to follow the case of his own will. Sorry, a phone came up. Not subject to the dominion of another, not compelled to voluntary servitude, used in this sense as opposed to slave.
Now,
that's the opposite of the subject to. It's free.
So, we have been subject to this corporation. We fought all of these wars for the last 100 years. You know, I've kind of taken the viewpoint that maybe we've been in Armageddon that was predicted by the Bible. Maybe we've been in Armageddon for the last 100 years. They just didn't bother to tell us in the press.
Well, they don't. The reason they don't tell us this is they hid it behind supposedly establishing racial equality, and that would have been a good thing had they actually done that. I mean, they tell us in school this new citizenship had to be created to have this racial equality, and if that was the case, it'd be great. I come from Jewish heritage, and my family's going to pick up a little bit too. I mean, I'm not against racial equality or nothing.
Let's talk about that just for a second. You know, I get slammed, Bruce, for being anti-Semitic because I talk about Israel. I talk about the Rothschilds' control of the bank. You know, the six-pointed star being the Rothschild shield that's now the flag on the state of Israel. Don't think it really has anything to do with the Bible. I don't know who my grandmother slept with. I don't know who yours slept with. I don't think it makes any difference. The Constitution is the first thing within in what 10,000 years, 4,000 years, something like that, that allowed the people to be able to govern themselves. And of course, that was under attack immediately from the forces of England, which was the first New World Order, wasn't it? The sun never sets over the English Empire.
Yes, sir.
We fought against that. We came against that. Who is our enemy now? Now we you know, you got some people out there that are pointing fingers at the Jews. The Jews are pointing fingers at the Muslims. You know, I just did a show talking about the Christians. You know, who were just hiding behind that and using that as an excuse to go to war or kill somebody else. Now, so I think religions are the problem. I don't think it has anything to do with race. We all bleed red. We all got DNA that came from somewhere. We're on this planet, and it seems to me everybody ought to be fighting for the rights of the individuals as that's laid out in our Constitution. And it's more like everybody's fighting against it. Is this the communist revolution that Khrushchev was talking about when he was pounding his shoe on the desk? Who won the Cold War? We were told we were fighting against communists, but bankers financed both sides. Who's the enemy here? I mean, now I've just got a film out called True Face of FEMA. I filmed the first Homeland Security meeting, and Colonel Brinkerhoff, lecturing law enforcement for FEMA, is telling people we're going to need 400,000 well-armed, well-trained, organized, disciplined troops here. We're going to have, you know, there's going to be riots, there's going to be atomic attacks, there's a single case of outbreak of smallpox. They're setting people up for martial law. They started planning that 10 years ago. They got the NDAA. That's moving another step. They could use the troops they trained in our house-to-house searches in Iraq to do the same thing in America. And it looks to me, from studying history, that the same things happened in America that happened in Russia.
Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany and Soviet Union. They killed 60 million white Christian Russians. Starved out 10 million farmers. That's like starving 10 million farmers. And
you know, I got a video on this that dates back to Ruby Ridge in Waco, Texas. I don't know if you ever heard of the gentleman Mark from Michigan.
Yes, I had Mark down. He spoke at our meetings in Albuquerque. I met him. I met John Stedmiller. I helped start the militias, and in New Mexico?
I got one of his videos, the second one from the bottom, under video link on dirtyunclesam.com, where he talks about how they're going to do the UN Small Arms Treaty and how these trained troops from Finland and everywhere else is going to come door to door to make us register our guns, just like they did in Nazi Germany. It's all blueprinted from some UN documents you see when he was over there. And he's talking about all this stuff and how it's already been set, the stage is set way back in the early 90s to do what they're doing now. Now, just recently, we've heard about just recently you started hearing about the UN Small Arms Treaty. If you go watch this video on my website from 1993, Mark's talking about it then. That's like 20 years ago, and it's just all of a sudden starting to be talked about today. Like it just came up with it.
You know, 20 years ago, I blew the whistle in one of my motorcycle magazines about Operation Watchtower. I got to hold a documentation from Colonel Edward P. Cotolo. I met the people that were on his special ops team, who happened to be doing life in Walpole Prison. But the CIA was running the drugs. The CIA and the Mossad were running the drugs through Panama, Manuel Noriega, and then on up to Mena, Arkansas. And recently, I just had Larry Pratt on my show talking about Eric Holder, BATF supplying guns to drug cartels in Mexico.
Mexico, yes, sir.
And by the way, let me give you a flash, folks. Let me give you a quick flash here. There's a story that broke about a militia guy in Arizona killing everybody and killing 6 people in this slaughter. They tried to blame it on the militia. They tried to blame it on J.T. Reddy. And they started making him out as a white supremacist and a racist, and it turns out that there was a witness there, folks, that survived. And it was a Mexican drug cartel hit, a professional hit. They killed J.T. Reddy and 5 other people. And J.T. Reddy was killed trying to save them when he was entering the house with a rifle. So this is more Oklahoma City bullshit, trying to blame things on militia. They're scared to death of the militia concept because the militia is you. It's us. Isn't it, Bruce? By law.
That's the only right they got to physically remove from your hands. They could tell you ain't got the right to speak or the right to vote or the right to a trial by jury and all that other with a stroke of a pen and a few words. So that right's an object. That's one they got to physically come get. And as long as we have them, they have to give us some illusion of having this Constitution that we haven't been under in over 100 years. You can believe in me, once they get rid of those things we have, the little metal objects on firearms, I don't think we're going to have that illusion of having this Constitution much longer, especially since they've been working on a new one since 1964, and there is no gun rights in that one.
What do you expect? I mean, look, we paid Halliburton $350 million to rebuild, and to dust off the detention centers. They tried to make it sound like they were going to be a player.
Well, I mean, for one thing, it's the same thing they've done the entire time, and it's worked every time. They sell us a line of crap and do something wrong for our own good. I mean, they've been selling us the Civil War was to free slaves the entire time. When the beginning of the Civil War, 4 northern states had slaves also. And at the end of the Civil War, the last 2 states to give up their slaves, Delaware and Kentucky, had them 8 months after the slaves surrendered their grant, and the South no longer had them. In fact, Delaware was in such protest of giving up their slaves that their state legislature waited to February 12, 1901, almost 40 years later, to ratify it. In fact, most people don't know about House Resolution number 80 from March 1861 that was ratified by the House and the Senate, keeping slavery as a state right. And the 7 southern states that were going to succeed did not vote on House Resolution 80. It's known as a Quorum Amendment. It's a different 13th Amendment. It is still pending. 3 northern states, the first year after the Civil War broke out, ratified it. State legislators. Not the first southern state has ever voted for it. Nor has any southern state ever ratified it, although Texas did make an attempt to do this, to ratify it in 1963 or 64 during the Civil Rights Movement, and was not successful. The Corwin Amendment is still pending. In fact, in my new video, I show a letter from a museum in Philadelphia where Abraham Lincoln hand-pinned to the governor of the state of Florida asking him to support the Corwin Amendment. In fact, Lincoln even mentions it, supporting the Corwin Amendment in his first inaugural address. So if the Civil War had anything to do with freeing slaves, all the southern states would have had to have done is stay in the Union and support the Corwin Amendment. That was 3 weeks, that passed House and Senate 3 weeks prior to the Civil War breaking out, March 24th, 1861. So the whole thing had nothing to do with freeing the slaves. In fact, I show in my new video, this is incredible, 2 incredible things. One, a letter from the United States Senate to the Army of the United States, Ulysses S. Grant. Now this letter is dated December 13th, 1867, and you can download it for free on my website, and it shows all the registered voters in the 10 southern states to be affected, and the rebel states that are being affected by the Reconstruction Acts. And it shows them broke down in white and colored categories. And there's states like Alabama that had more voters, black voters, colored voters, than whites. But yet we're told in school the first time blacks were ever given the right to vote will be 3 years later, February 5th, 1870, with the 15th Amendment. But I show in the video where there was already voting 3 years prior to that. And I show in the video in 1866, December, Florida House Journal, where the state of Florida talks about how we've took an oath back prescribed by the president to be a part of this country again, and we've given the free people all the rights to be sued and be sued as the white folks, basically, and in the area. We have not, in no area, kept the black folks and white folks to being equal. Here it is. I can read it word for word, right off of the Florida House Journal, page 9 of it. Let's see. We took an oath prescribed by the President to support the Constitution of the United States and Union of the States thereunder, to abide by, faithfully support all laws and proclamations made with reference to the emancipation of slaves. We repudiated all debts contracted in support of rebellion. We declared the ordinance of secession null and void. We adopted the proposed constitutional amendment abolishing slavery throughout the United States. We enabled the free men to sue and be sued and be witnesses in our courts, and put them on a perfect equality with white men as to all rights either of person or property. In short, we left nothing undone as the government, acting through the president, demanded of us. But still our constitutional representation is denied. And what they're talking about is when the 14th Amendment got ratified in Congress, 23 senators, like I show on the memorialized congressional record, page 156441, were ejected from Congress. These are northern and southern senators.
While you're there, could you possibly speak about the original 13th Amendment that was somehow lost or destroyed, that prevented...
That's in my video. I show about 6 different constitutions before the Civil War. Towards the end of my video, showing, hey, if this thing was really ratified, if you vote for me for Congress, I want to do a full investigation, because almost every elected official we have in this country would have a title of nobility, according to the way that amendment is wrote. That'd be a heck of a good way of taking out the trash, especially since there's a museum in England that has an old constitution on display, from one of our old constitutions on display, and it shows the 13th Amendment in it as well.
That's right. It was there. Researcher David Dodge and some other friends of mine have done a lot of research on that. And yeah, that was real, and that would eliminate.
Remember I pointed.
I'm sorry, but that would eliminate.
Out where the different constitution was created.
Yes.
In February 1871, they gave all the, and that's why every 20 years, they did it last year, they read that Constitution in the record. They started it in 1871. They've done it every 20 years since. And you know why? Because they don't renew their corporate charter every 20 years, they lose it.
Now, Bruce, I have been in presidential races. I've been to the presidential race in 1996 with Charles Collins. Charles Collins was running for president. He was out of Florida. He lived in Georgia, had a beautiful place in Georgia. He was a banker, a Rhodes Scholar, and he was the first Republican to sign up in 1996 for the presidency. And I was there at the meetings with Bob Dole and Pat Buchanan, Alan Keyes, and a few others. And every time Charles got up to speak, he tried to tell the Republican Party, we could buy back the Federal Reserve, we could wipe out a $6 trillion debt at the time, and we could do that for $500 million. We could do that, but
well, sir, the debt's not real. You know that, right?
What's that?
The national debt's not real.
Yes.
And you know how it is? I mean, there's two different ways it's fake. It's all based on 14th Amendment, Section 4, which not only makes that new corporate citizen, that's why the only one responsible for this debt is the 14th Amendment citizen. That's why the 14th Amendment citizen is the only one responsible to pay income tax. The 16th Amendment, which other folks think wasn't properly ratified, and it wasn't. It's a corporate tax. But anyway, it's the entire national debt, all these debt bonds, is all based on the citizenship of the United States. And that citizen is responsible for the public debt. But the 14th Amendment was never properly ratified, especially since they had not. Even if it was properly ratified, it'd still be unconstitutional. The Supremacy Clause in the Constitution, Article 6, Paragraph 2, the Constitution strikes anything with null to try to supersede it. This is a new form of government, a new jurisdiction, a new citizenship than what the Constitution created. So yeah, it would violate the Supremacy Clause right there. But even if it was properly ratified, but most people don't know, but Congress knows. I show a 2008 CRS report which shows Executive Order 6 said the 14th Amendment was ratified. Executive Order 7 ordered it lawful and published. And both 6 or 7 were never signed by the President. They were only signed by the Secretary of State. Remember, the President was against the Reconstruction Acts and the 14th Amendment, Andrew Johnson. So yeah, he wouldn't have signed those 2 fake executive orders. And that's why they were booked and paged as presidential proclamations 11 and 13 instead. I show them too. And everyone in Congress had a copy of this CRS report, November 26, 2008, order number 98-611-GOV, Congressional Research Service. Page 5 of this, which is CRS-2, top paragraph, says it. The 14th Amendment's fake. And you're a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of the 14th Amendment. The national debt applies to you, and so does income tax. Now look at all the Tea Party folks and pro-constitutional groups and the gun groups and everybody else that's been whining and complaining about they're losing what they think their rights are. All comes from an amendment that's not even real. When the governor of the state of Montana said he wanted to start making his guns and his firearms within his state borders, and that way they would have exercised their state rights pursuant to the 10th Amendment, and the federal government wouldn't have jurisdiction when the ATF could tell that governor. The 14th Amendment gives us jurisdiction. Now since then they told South Carolina and Tennessee the State Streets Act gives jurisdiction, which is the Gun Control Act of '68. It's a 14th Amendment jurisdictional law. In fact, to try to sell the ideology, the 14th Amendment made all the people free and racial equality, when nowhere in the 14th Amendment does it say that. And think about it. Our government has operated from 1868, July 28th, until today, under this jurisdiction. That means all the segregation laws until the Civil Rights Act of 1964 were done with the 14th Amendment jurisdiction from 1868 until that point. That's 96 years of racist laws under the 14th Amendment's jurisdiction before the Civil Rights Act ended it. From 1964 ended it.
Now,
that's the only jurisdiction the government operated under. So not black lady got arrested. It's not moving to the back of the bus.
We're coming up on the half hour here, Bruce, and we'll stop this recording and start one more and do the second half. But when Charles got up to speak, and to